Hi everyone, I'm Rich, and this is Mission 1820. You know, every day we make hundreds of decisions. Some are easy and some not so easy. But have you ever made a decision that you regretted because you simply made it out of peer pressure? At times we know what is right, but we still choose what is wrong. Now this week we're going to highlight the man that many believe was responsible for the death of Jesus Christ because he gave in to peer pressure and he went against what he knew was right. That is Pontius Pilate. So if you're ready to learn more about the man who handed over Jesus to be crucified, then you're in the right place. So sit back, relax, and let's get started in this week's Characters of the Bible. You know, we all make mistakes and we all make wrong decisions. But today we're going to look into the life of Pontius Pilate and we're going to see if we can uncover any weaknesses in his life that would have led him to hand over Jesus to be crucified. Now, unlike Judas Iscariot, who sold out Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, Pontius Pilate sold out Jesus for a completely different reason. And that was because of peer pressure, pure and simple. You see, for Pilate, there was never a doubt about Jesus' innocence, because 3 separate times, Pilate is declared Jesus not guilty. But the problem was that his fear of the Jews' political pressure made him to allow Jesus' crucifixion, mainly because Pilate feared that they would essentially rat him out to the Emperor Tiberius, that he didn't eliminate a rebel that was against Rome. Pilate went against what he knew was right, and in desperation, he chose to do wrong. So before we go any further, let's get a better understanding of who Pilate actually was. Now, not much is documented about his birth and his early life, but what we do know is that Pilate was born in the 1st century BC, and most presume that he was born in the small village of Vicente, which is now in central Italy. But what we are certain is that he was born in the Roman Empire. Now, Pilate was appointed the 5th Roman governor of Judea by Emperor Tiberius, and he ruled for 10 years from 26 AD to 36 AD, governing the regions of Judea. Now, this is unique in itself because most of the other governors only ruled for a 3-year period. This means that Tiberius must have considered Pilate an effective administrator. Pilate was probably an Italian-born Roman citizen whose family was wealthy enough for him to qualify to be in the middle class. He also most likely held some certain military posts before his appointment to governor in Judea. And as a prefect, Pilate had absolute authority over the non-Roman citizens of the province. Now, Pilate mostly lived in Caesarea with his wife Claudia Procula, but often he would need to travel to Jerusalem in order to perform his duties during the festival of the Passover. Essentially, he became a security guard because he was there in order to maintain order and decorum during that event. As a Roman prefect, Pontius Pilate was granted the power of a supreme judge, which meant that he had the sole authority to order a criminal's execution. His duties as a prefect included other tasks such as tax collection, and he also managed any ongoing construction projects. But perhaps his most crucial responsibility was that of maintaining law and order, and he attempted to do so by any means necessary. What Pilate couldn't negotiate, he is said to have accomplished through brute force. And this made him really unpopular with the Jews. And when they responded to Pilate's rule with enraged opposition, he often backed down, demonstrating that big weakness that he had. Now, Pilate greatly angered the Jews when he ended up taking money from their temple treasury in order to build an aqueduct to supply water to Jerusalem. Now, This angered them because they certainly didn't want him taking money from their treasury. So many of the Jews reacted violently to this act by Pilate. And so his soldiers ended up killing many of them in this rebellion. Now, this plays into the reason why Pilate gave up Jesus to be crucified, because since the Jews couldn't execute a person without the approval of Roman authority, they brought him to Pilate for him to announce the death sentence of Jesus. One of Pilate's weaknesses is that his constant political struggles made him a cynical and an uncaring compromiser, and that made him very susceptible to the peer pressure. And although he realized that Jesus was innocent, it was that weakness in him that made him bow to the public demand for Jesus' execution. Now, Pilate's a good example of the unprincipled achiever who will sacrifice what is right in order to accomplish his own selfish goals. Although Pilate recognized Jesus' innocence and he had that authority to uphold justice and acquit him, Pilate made that decision to protect his own selfish ambition, and he gave in to the pressure from the crowd rather than risk a personal setback in his own career. You know, in the end, there's nothing that tells us that Pilate was a bad guy. Yeah, I know he gave up Jesus, but he didn't give up Jesus because he was a bad guy. The problem was that he ignored every possible sign that came before him. He ignored his own conscience. He disregarded the advice of his wife, bad thing to do. He chose political expediency over public goodness. But at the end, he failed to recognize the truth, even when truth was standing right in front of him. Pilate made a decision that he knew was wrong, but he did it anyways. You know, we share a common humanity with Pilate because at times we know what is the right decision, but yet we still choose the wrong one anyways. Pilate had his moment in history and he failed miserably, and now we have ours. What have we done with our opportunities and our responsibilities when it comes to Jesus? When we're given an opportunity to evaluate the claims of Jesus, what will we ultimately decide? Will we accept and defend his claim that he is king? Or will we bow to the pressure of the crowd just as Pilate did? All right, guys. Well, that's pretty much all that we know about Pontius Pilate. So I hope that this helped you get to know him just a little bit better. So until next time, have a great day. And as always, God bless and thanks for watching.